My name is Darren Canady, and we are here to discuss memories and recollections of the 1966 tornado that hit Topeka, Kansas. And we are here with Linda Canady, my mom, and Mr. Garry Cushinberry. I'll let them introduce themselves and say a little bit about their lives and their connections to Topeka.
Well, as he said, I'm Linda Canady, and I am a native Topekan, so the tornado literally ripped apart my hometown.
Oh, and I'm Garry Cushinberry, longtime family friend of the Canady/Evans family. 66 tornado devastated our area, or the area that we lived in, which is probably 14th and Western down to 21st and Fillmore. That general area was where we resided at the time, and it was quite an event.
I was 15 at the time of the tornado. Had just finished the 9th grade and had decided to get a head start on my high school career, so I was taking a summer school class. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Let's see. I was at home when the tornado hit. I personally had always had a fear of tornadoes. So for me, it was kind of strange, because when the sirens went off that day, I can remember saying, "This is it, you guys. It's going to really happen." I was at home.
And where was your house? Where was that?
We lived in the 1400 block of Western. 1400 block, and the actual address was 1415 Western. A lot of family members were there that day. My family, a large extended family, and we had a couple of uncles visiting with us. We had a family friend. So it was a house full of people when the tornado hit. We had been watching Charlie Brown on TV. And I can remember when the sirens went off, I said, "You guys, this is going to be the real one. It's really going to happen this time." And so I picked up a chair and a book and a blanket and a candle and some matches and went down into
the tornado survival kit.
went down into our basement. This was not a finished basement. This is not the kind of basement that you would go to for fun. It literally was more like a cellar, almost with a dirt floor, and I can remember there was a small window. But I told everyone this was really going to be the tornado, and so I went downstairs, and I was scared I would never have gone down there by myself. But since this was really going to be a tornado, I went to the basement, and I could hear everybody else upstairs just kind of laughing and talking until, Bill Curtis came on, and was telling everyone, to definitely take cover.
So one
by one, my family members started coming down into this cellar basement. My brother Ron upstairs was the last one to come down, and he barely made it before we heard the freight train sound.
As I say, like they always say, it sounds like a freight train.
He got to the top step and jumped all the way to the bottom of the basement, bottom of the stairs. And it literally did sound like a freight train going over. That really is true. There's no question about that. And that small window down there in the basement wasn't bolted very well, and I can remember it vibrating, and my uncle trying to hold the window in place as as the winds picked up, and you could hear the sound, and you could hear the debris. It was like nothing we had ever been through before. I know I had never experienced anything in my life like that. And so here all we were in the basement, huddled with my blanket over the one blanket that I had taken to the basement. And when we came up, after the sound had died down and everybody came upstairs, we had a family friend who did not come down to the basement. His name was Freddie. And Freddie, I think Freddie had had a few too many that day. And so,
a few too many what? What do you mean?
Oh, maybe a few too many beers. So Freddie had just kind of crawled next to a big chair. And he rode out the storm beside the chair. I almost think he was sort of under the chair is what I really think. But when we came upstairs, Freddie was still there. Our home was still intact for the most part. We were right on the edge of the massive damage. 4 houses down, the roof was gone, and the next block was basically gone.
That's to the north.
To the north,
right.
To the
right,
north.
Right.
So we were now. There were 2 cars parked in the backyard, and there were trees on top of the cars. When we opened the front door and stepped out, I can remember my first words were, "Oh my God," because it was as though there was a forest that had collapsed in the front yard. There were so many trees and so much debris. It was all in the yard. It was out in the street. It was just devastation.
Surreal.
Absolutely surreal.
Yeah.
Absolutely surreal.
And it's Garry, what your chain of events and where you were?
Well, I was about 9 at the time, and I can remember being up the street, probably playing stickball or baseball in the street, and
The street being
Fillmore Street. I was raised at the time I was born at 1800 block on Fillmore, 1816 Fillmore, or 1820, and then we had moved down to 1919 Fillmore, and so we were kind of on the south edge of all the destruction as well. We were about 6 blocks from Washburn University, due east of Washburn University, which took a direct hit. And I can remember my dad being I was going to say ex-farmer, but a farmer, always watched the weather. And I can remember him coming out. And back then, you kids didn't stray much further than the voice of your parent. Or you were a kid away, so if somebody would say, "Hey man, I heard your mother calling for you," that meant you better scoot on back home. And I can remember Dad coming out in the street, hollering at us up the street to come home. And you could tell the skies started kind of turning orange, and things started happening, a little wind at the beginning, then the stillness comes, and then it kind of gets like a bright orange or something, but you can tell something's going on.
Yeah, it was a strange color.
Yeah, and I didn't know what atmosphere meant at the time, but you could tell something was going on. I can remember him hollering, telling us to come home, and there was a tone in his voice that meant, come home right now. So I can remember running as fast as I could down the middle of the street, to get home. My mom and little brother were over at 13th and Van Buren, over my mom's girlfriend's house. And I can't remember, I want to say I was with Alonzo, but which would have been Darren's uncle and Linda's brother-in-law, because he was my best pal. Then typically if we were out playing, he'd be the one I'd be playing with. And he was always faster than me. I remember that too.
He was faster than a lot.
Yeah, exactly right. You're right. But he's also scarier than everybody else. And so it didn't take much for him to be startled and for him to go. And so I remember, I think that was that tornado, because we kind of went through a couple tornadoes, of him taking off, streaking down to our house, and him and I going, and we're getting in the basement. And just as we got into the basement, I think Dad must have been watching Channel 13.
Everybody was watching.
And so we were down in the basement, and we had a door that faced to the south. And Dad kept the door open, and as the train came across, the rumbling, you could just see debris just going, doors and trees and all kind of things. And I guess it was things that were coming from Washburn.
Wow.
Because the path of the tornado kind of came across Washburn.
Yeah. Across Central Park.
Yeah. And Central Park would have been Linda's Park. That would have been the closest park to Linda's house, which is about 2 blocks away.
Yeah.
And it had 2 big ponds, and we used to go play there all the time, because it was kind of in between. I went to Central Park Elementary School, which got crushed by the tornado.
Yes.
If that tornado would have occurred a week or 2 earlier, it would have been a bunch of school kids probably dead, because they, back then all the kids would go to the basement Central Park was an old brick building, and it just kind of crushed down to the basement. So that's my earliest recollection of it happening. You know, the afterwards event, coming outside and seeing leaves and trees and those type of things. And the biggest thing was my dad being concerned about my mom and little brother. And it was starting to turn dusk, because I think it happened in the evening, and it started getting dark. And we had to navigate from 19th and Fillmore to 13th and Van Buren to pick my mother and little brother up, because a tree had fallen on the car over there on Van Buren Street. And I can remember driving through town and going, and power lines being down, crackling, and we'd have to back up and go another route. And that probably took us, seems like hours to a 9-year-old. But that was my initial thoughts of the tornado at that time, as we got in the car and we rode through, and I got a chance to see some of the devastation.
My dad was not at home when it happened. Daddy was at work, and he almost couldn't get back into the neighborhood.
Your dad worked at Goodyear?
He worked at the state hospital. Okay. And so when he tried to come home, by then they were checking IDs of everyone coming into the neighborhood, and so you couldn't.
What were they trying to ascertain? Like whether you actually lived in that neighborhood?
For fear of looting. I remember military.
Exactly.
I remember military.
Exactly.
I never had much encounter with the military, the boys at Forbes.
Okay, right.
You know, I was too small to be interacting with them. I do remember seeing down on 4th Street, seeing guys in uniforms prior to, but you know, I never really interacted with them. But for some reason that night, I remember seeing military people in town.
So did they call in the National Guard, or was it just?
I don't know. I just remember seeing military people around. I really never followed up on it, but I would imagine it was a disaster of that magnitude that the governor probably would have called up the National Guard.
And probably so. Now, because we were young, I mean, it's not like we were, just driving around town or whatever. But what I do remember, the two groups that I remember being most active in terms of cleaning up the neighborhood in the aftermath and or taking care of people, I can remember the Red Cross driving around, passing out sandwiches. Because, I mean, in many cases you couldn't get out of your neighborhood. I mean, it was very difficult. But I remember the Mennonites coming in large groups. They cleaned up all of the trees in the backyards. It was amazing. Truly, simply out of the goodness of their heart. And they would show up unannounced. They would say, "What do you need? What help can we provide?" I will always remember that.
That's interesting. I don't remember the Mennonites.
I do.
What I do remember, my mom had friends over in the Ripley Park area, we'll call it. That's the 3rd Lime, 4th and Lake. But what I also remember is that neighborhood didn't get as near as much media attention as the west side of town did.
It's true.
But if you go back and look how media covered, media just weren't covering minority issues or minority areas. But I don't know if there were any deaths recorded over in that area, but I know devastation, there was probably just as much devastation on the east side of town. And when I say east side, I want to say from probably downtown until it lifted off to that direction. But all we heard about, as I recall, was Washburn and parts west. And I don't know, maybe that's where the deaths were, and maybe that's where the tension was, but it wasn't until later that we were able to get around, that we were able to get on that side of town and see how devastated back then that was the black side of town.
Yeah, right.
It was the black side of town, and I'm sure there were some Latinos in there as well as some German folks, around the Sacred Heart area, but it was predominantly where the black folks lived.